So the Fed has just threatened to sue Bitcoin Magazine. Yes, you're right, such a big and important institution is worried about a small cryptocurrency magazine. I mean, it's one of the largest, but still, you know what I mean? And you must be wondering why. Well, it's because Bitcoin Magazine has this awesome merchandise here that you can see that, ends up talking about FedNow, the new Fed 24-hour banking system, very similar to CBDC, we would say. And Bitcoin Magazine is pointing it out with their merchandise, and the Fed is not enjoying it, that's for sure. I brought this video that is a bit different to you because it's very interesting to see what are the arguments of the Fed against to threaten to sue, I would say, Bitcoin Magazine, but also the response of Bitcoin Magazine that I think is super important, super inspiring for the all cryptocurrency industry. We should all learn from it, I would say. So to help us in this analysis, I think it's important to watch and read both sides of the question. And for that, we have here a very interesting article from Zero Edge that depicts the side of the US Federal Reserve and also the side of the Bitcoin Magazine. As we can see here, is basically the Fed is claiming that Bitcoin Magazine merchandise that parodies its services is not protected by speech, by freedom of speech, but rather is an unauthorized infringement of its image and trademarks. So they are claiming that Bitcoin Magazine is stealing their trademark FedNow. We can see here some of the merchandise Bitcoin Magazine has. It's basically talking about FedNow, and with this eye that you can see here that, kind of mentions the surveillance of the Fed, the surveillance that they can do with FedNow, as they can see all the transactions, track all the transactions, define the rules, decide which transactions can go through, which should be stopped. So, it's not a lie what they are saying here. It's almost like a parody, a criticism to the Fed, at least in my opinion. And there's nothing to do with the actual logo of the Fed and of FedNow that we can see here. In fact, their logo has this 24/7 instant payments and this special arrow, circled arrow that goes all around. I don't know, kind of like a clock or a laundry. Although supposedly you should not laundry money with the FedNow, right? But yeah, it's a strange logo, I would say. I think I like the one about Bitcoin Magazine much more because it's more realistic. And yeah, it's a cool merchandise and a way to criticize, in my opinion. But the Fed doesn't see it that way. Or they might be trying to stop the criticism. They might be trying to censor this criticism from the Bitcoin Magazine, because basically with this merchandise, with some of their articles and work, they are warning everyone about the surveillance capabilities of the FedNow system and how it threatens American civil liberties. But I guess the Fed doesn't like that. It's not bringing positive awareness to the FedNow, quite the contrary. And they probably don't want someone to show this narrative to warn people of the dangers of FedNow, or else people won't adopt it. And they clearly have the agenda for them to adopt it. So in terms of the lawsuit, in terms of this threat done by the Fed, they basically say that they are using their trademark without their permission, and this may lead users to believe there is a connection between the publication and the central bank, which I don't know what kind of argument is this. I don't think it makes any sense if we think about it, because first, I don't think with this kind of criticism, Bitcoin Magazine is trying to associate to the Fed, is trying to say they're on the side or working with the Fed. I think that's the complete opposite, and everyone can see that by the logo and by the parodies and by the cease and desist order, for example, that you have here in some of the merchandise. It doesn't really make much sense. But yeah, I mean, it's just a weak argument on my opinion. And what I see here is them just, very worried about this kind of publicity, very worried, so much so that they don't have a good argument. They just put a lawsuit, they just threaten companies with probably the intention of, scaring them with the big institution and the reputation of the Fed, and to make them stop, to kind of censor what they are saying and take away their freedom of speech, which is very worrying. And to have a institution that should serve the population, but that instead is just controlling the narrative to attain its own goals. And I think this is very, very worrying. And the kind of arguments for me, but I'm not a lawyer, so I cannot say, but they seem very weak. But the truth is that Bitcoin Magazine did answer with an open letter to the Federal Reserve. Reading this letter, we can see they start with, Dear Thaddeus Murphy, on behalf of the entire team at Bitcoin Magazine, I wanted to take the time to thank you for your thoughtful inquiry. After having browsed our online store, doing your Christmas shop early, love to see it. Let us know if we can send a box of merchandise to any of the 12 Federal Reserve banks. Really cool how they start with a lot of, I don't know, spirit and a lot of guts and playing around with them. I think it's very interesting. What I think is also interesting, coming back to the Fed and their arguments, is their arguments are super weak. And at no point did they criticize the content of the merchandise of Bitcoin Magazine. And that's very interesting to see and very worrying as well, because they are basically stating and warning people about the issues of FedNow, that people can surveil your transactions, surveil your financial life completely with the FedNow, and they can keep track of everything you're doing. And not in a single moment in this letter did the Fed try to refute the criticism, try to say they were being unlawfully represented, and that was say, they could allege that what Bitcoin Magazine was saying is actually defamation, but they didn't went that route. So what does that mean? They want to stop this kind of publicity, and instead of using a strong argument like defamation and proving it, they just use this trademark argument. So what that means is that in fact it's true. There will be surveillance, and everyone should be worried about that. So please, if you want to keep your liberties, if you want to have freedom, if you don't want to be completely controlled by the Fed and by the government, the Fed is even a private institution held by private banks, so it's even worse than just the government, I would say. And if you don't want to be controlled by them, just put a like on this video so it reaches more people. Share it with anyone you think should listen to this, because there are people out there that are for sure thinking about adopting FedNow and other kind of technologies similar to CBDCs or even CBDCs in themselves. And these technologies are super, super dangerous. They can really take away all of our freedoms, because if we don't have financial freedom, we cannot do anything. We don't have the power to have ownership over our life, or even the power to go against the establishment, and in this case the government, for example, even if they are not representing us properly, or if they are straight out arming us, which is super dangerous. But yeah, continue reading the letter. They also state that the Fed might enjoy reading the content on Bitcoin Magazine discussing the damages of the Fed policies in the economy and the country, which is also very spicy. Then they go on to business, and they say here they will refuse to comply to the order. In fact, they say they will not be intimidated and they won't stop criticizing, which I think is super important. We need to stay true to ourselves and have the freedom to criticize what we don't agree with, because not everything will be done right. There's no one that knows better what's good for us than ourselves. So we need to take ownership over our life, and instead of leaving our future and big decisions for other people, for politicians, for whatever, we should be informed, at least informed enough to make sure those big decisions that are being made are representing us well and are done in our best interests instead of the opposite. So it's not just about criticizing the state, how things is going. We need to also take responsibility and criticize them with actual arguments, with actual rationale to back it up. And I think it's really good that Bitcoin Magazine is going against the FedNow system, against the CBDCs that are, that are a terrible use of cryptocurrency. It's using it for the bad and not good. And we want to see, I would say, more institutions that have a platform that can reach people doing that as well. More people, more institutions, it would be great to see. And I think in cryptocurrency world, we should share these principles to go against CBDCs, because the principles of cryptocurrency is to have a fairer form of money, and CBDCs are all but that. So we should definitely join together, no matter if you're from Bitcoin, if you're a fan of Ethereum or a fan of Cardano or whatever. We should definitely join together and stand and uphold these values that we all share, and forget about the tribalism, because it won't take us anywhere. Collaboration will take us further. But coming back to the article, they state that our leadership is, worried about the FedNow system, worried to say the least. And they even say they believe that it's not only possibly unconstitutional, but that it threatens the very freedoms that all liberty-loving American citizens should hold dear. And this is very true. It is a great threat to our freedom. In America and in anywhere else in the world where CBDCs can be implemented. I'm in Europe, for example, and I'm worried about the digital euro for sure. And I support people in America fighting against the FedNow and other CBDCs, as I do the same for people in Europe fighting against it. So yeah, they also invoke the First Amendment because it's in the First Amendment rights, and it's true to exercise freedom of speech and to criticize. It's right to criticize if you don't agree with something, and people shouldn't be censored by criticizing, or else we'll just have all one opinion, and we have almost like a dictatorship in whether you either follow that opinion and that narrative, or you'll be shut by the government, by the laws, by everything. That's super, super dangerous. That's not democratic at all, and we want to avoid that. And it's not good to see institutions such as the Fed having behaviors that are not at all democratic. It's worrying, and I think for me, it entails more criticism, and this criticism they deserve for the actions that they have been having that are terrible. Why, instead of worrying about someone doing merchandise criticizing FedNow, shouldn't you focus a little bit more on your work? And that's something that the Bitcoin Magazine ends up saying as well and stating in this letter. They have in fact also answered directly to some of the quotes present on the Fed's letter. For example, this one where you have the Federal Reserve saying that they have extensively used and promoted the FedNow mark and has built up a substantial goodwill in this invaluable asset. Wow. Financial institutions and consumers associate the FedNow mark with the Federal Reserve and its services. Well, basically the guys from Bitcoin Magazine just start questioning what is the goodwill the Federal Reserve has built up. Have you seen the state of the working class today? Perhaps you've forgotten how Fed policy directly led to the mismanagement of bond portfolios in regional banks across the country, such as Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, Silvergate, or First Republic. Perhaps you've already forgotten about the historic inflation rates seen throughout the US since government-imposed lockdowns all but forced the treasuries and to stimulate the economy to the tune of $1 trillion. So very valid points. They state how the laws and regional banks and financial institutions being obliged to earn bonds and to hold bonds in their balance sheet has caused all these issues, especially with decrease in inflation and decrease in interest rate at such a fast pace that made a lot of these banks have significant losses in their balance sheet because they were holding these bonds that are now worth much less because the interest rate is much higher right now. So they even come to say there is no goodwill, and certainly not substantial goodwill either. Then they also refer to another quote in the Fed's letter that states that Bitcoin magazine use of the FedNow mark in this manner is likely to cause confusion, mistakes, or deception. Consumers are likely to believe that the gear is associated with, affiliated with, or endorsed by the Federal Reserve when no such association or relationship exists. And the Bitcoin magazine comes to the point of saying that it is false. They're exercising their First Amendment rights of social commentary and parody. I'm sure you'll notice that all-seeing eye that symbolizes the state of total financial surveillance that your agency is seeking to impose on the American financial system. We do not believe that anyone that is familiar with our editorial guidelines and general stance on the world would ever associate Bitcoin magazine with the Federal Reserve. We agree with your assertion that no such association or relationship exists. So yeah, they say they have no interest in causing confusion, mistakes, or deception. That sounds more like a job for those responsible for telling the market they wouldn't raise rates after a massive monetary expansion, and then went on to raise them faster than at any time in the US financial history. So another criticism, they just, it's a great letter because answering all the things mentioned in the letter, they also bring and raise some important points. They show they are not afraid of the authority. They stand for their own ground, which is very important. They are not intimidated by institutions and by coming and threatening to sue them. And, they are not afraid of pointing out some of the Fed's mistakes, some of the things the Fed did, and even hinting on how they should be more focused on their job, to do a better job than they have done so far, than actually wasting time trying to censor anyone that goes against the Fed now and criticizes it. So yeah, for sure, this is a thing I'd like to see from more people in our space. I want us to be brave enough, not just our space, but our society as a whole, in the West, the Western society, to be able to be braver, to stand our ground, to question our institutions, to criticize them if it's warranted, if it's deserved. We should be and doing that, and we should have the freedom to do that as well. But we need to make use of our rights. We have that right to criticize and to have that freedom of speech. So we need to make use of it, and we need to be informed, and we need to say when we don't agree to things, because if we join together and we all don't agree, we have a lot of power. So someone needs to start criticizing, showing people why we believe this, and people get informed, and they might understand the important topics we are raising, because these are topics that are related with our freedom, with our financial freedom, which is super important. We don't want freedom to be taken away from us. Well, on my side, that's all. I hope you understand. This was a bit of a different video, but I think it was a very important topic to speak about, and I wanted to speak about this with you. So if you enjoyed it, or if you want to keep following this channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We have some great videos about cryptocurrency decentralization, and sometimes, like this time, I might bring some interesting topics and some values and ideals to be discussed. I hope you're okay with it. But if you care about cryptocurrency and you want to see some of the amazing impact cryptocurrency can have in the world when our government is failing us, can have in our country, in our life, in our survival when our government is failing us, you should check this video here in the end page about what is happening to Lebanon. They are facing a very worrying hyperinflation crisis. and people are using cryptocurrency as a way to get money, to be paid, to do transactions, to buy the things they need for their daily life. And cryptocurrency is being very useful and allowing a lot of people to survive. So you can check that here on the end page. On my side, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting with your likes, with your subscriptions, and I'll see you on the video about the Lebanon crisis.